my fault because I didn't hit the right button. But we had a bad link, so we couldn't get Zay on here. And Zay is the primary part of why y'all come on here. I know it is, and I'm not even saying it to be funny, because he the reason I come on.
No man, no man,
He
no
the
man.
main reason why I come. So
No, the reason they come is because of you.
nah, man. First of all, I hate your mama referred to it as what she call it, a
TV show.
blindcast. What she call
She called it the TV show.
a TV show. I mean, but it blesses my soul. So, but today me and Zay really had to take a break because we wanted to live, and so that was it was a
I
forced
had
self.
COVID, the flu, and all of that at one time. So I've
Yeah,
been out for like the last almost month.
yeah, like the whole. I mean, and that's psycho. That's nuts to me. So, um, but that's what life has looked like for us. And then I am trying to see us on Facebook. I don't know if everybody can hear us. I might have to repeat some of that because trying to see if we are on. We are on
I'm
Facebook,
trying
all the
to.
channels.
I think we're on all the channels. I am trying to make sure that you can see me because on this app it's not picking up the light.
Is it?
I look
It's
really
not
dark, but that I mean,
okay. We trying new stuff, y'all. I actually like. I don't mind trying new stuff. Um, Especially when it's something that could be beneficial to everyone. So I don't mind trying new stuff. Just trying to get it out to make sure that it's out there.
oh, I
Um,
love this. This is amazing.
yeah, it's like so. This is when you try new stuff, and the app is beautiful.
Yeah,
I
this
ain't gonna
is
lie, it's great. Oh my god, I love it.
yeah,
So
yeah. This is
this is
great.
beautiful. So I
Yeah,
not knocking StreamYard. I
like,
don't want to knock it. I ain't knocking StreamYard. There's some people that StreamYard works for them. But no, so and we get our audience back. So me and Zay just told our business. We got a new product. Um the new product is great. We love it. And so with this new product though, y'all might didn't hear what we said. Zay is trying to work with his lighting, but the product itself, Restream, I ain't knocking StreamYard. They served us well for 2 years almost, but we had to get something else. We had to try again.
yeah,
We had to upgrade. I'm gonna say something else, but I'm trying to be good because I'm very aware of who our audience is, and they miss us. I'm trying to be good though because we got a pastor in Atlanta. You was down and out and sick and shut in. We both were really, but that pastor that I already know. I don't want you to say nothing bad on the platform either. He he said, Zay, that he gonna grow some marijuana.
yeah. I want to talk about that because my thing is this same pastor said that sage was demonic, but now you're gonna grow marijuana on the church's property. And at first I would have been with it if you were saying that you were doing it to allow access to those who need medicinal marijuana. It would be an opportunity to help those who could not, and trying to change that tide and change the stigma of marijuana and black people and drug dealing. I would have been with it, but you said you were doing this to get more people in the church. So basically, this is not about care of people. This is about you wanting to live the lifestyle that you came down here trying to live and trying to get. I mean, the first thing you did when you came down here was record yourself going shopping at one of the top malls the first weekend you was here. And so now you want to sell weed so that you can facilitate that lifestyle. And so when we talk about pimps, um, hoes, and prophets in the pulpit, we have to mention his name. And we're not going to mention his name out of respect because although he disrespected some of the people I admire and love, I will not return that same favor to him because I want God to bless me. And not bless me in a way where I have to be shady to be blessed. But I want God to bless me with the favor and the grace of God. So I will not call his name. I will not even give intimation to. If you know who he is, you know who he is. And so that's my point. When he said that out of his mouth, that he wants to do it to bring people to the church and increase his members, for me, I think You know, I hung around a lot of old people, and I'm gonna shut up. But they used to tell me that if you keep talking, you'll eventually tell the truth.
Woo!
And
Lord, I
so,
had the truth to show up because the truth will show up. Cause it can't do nothing but truth. Truth and
yeah,
ain't nothing but truthing.
yeah.
That's all it's gonna do.
And so he kept talking, trying to sound deep and trying to use these big words and sound like he was making some theological impartation. But the truth came out. You broke, you're in debt, you want a lifestyle that you talked about the previous pastor of the church about having, and now you want that same lifestyle. But see, that person did it by building up people. You're doing it by selling drugs.
Mm, my Lord. So that people ain't talking yet. I had it up. Again, playing with the new moment. Me and Zach, we go, we'll dig today. We probably gonna touch on some of it because there's another thing that came up. And y'all know my mental health moment went bing, bing, bing. So there is, I don't really know how big this person is. I sit with
You
them.
won't say his name either.
Now we're not gonna say names today, but the person, out of all the things that was said in the post, all that, the person says that we're gonna not trauma remind. And I ain't never heard of that. Out of all the trauma stuff, I don't know what a trauma remind is.
Isn't that your expertise, trauma and grief, and
So I
you
didn't
never
know
heard
what
of
that
trauma
was,
remind?
and I talked to Zay. I just sent him something, but then I asked somebody, and they was like, "No, I never heard of trauma remind either." So what I initially said, I said, Zay, this is what we're talking about. And I thought about, the biggest trauma remind, because I don't think I can think of. I didn't ask the person actually, because I didn't know, if I needed to, based upon everything else that was said inside of the post. So, but the trauma remind, like being reminded of your trauma, the people that I thought about the most were the children of Israel on that 40-year journey. They could have took probably less than 40 days. What a trauma remind. And so, I was reading, I said, God, what does this look like? And we get to Deuteronomy. Hey, case and blessings. And we get to, hey, Dr. Sherry, we get to the trauma remind. So I want to read the text because more than likely, the other pastor probably going to come up too. Because something happens when we live in scarcity and when we don't like to talk about our story. And if anybody has read Dr. Edward Wimberly in the myths of the storytellers for caregivers, I use those myths even if it's not, because we sometimes will underplay or overplay our stuff. And so all depends on where we're going, but we won't get to the heart of the matter. That's a term that is used in spiritual care. We won't get to the nastiness of it. That's what I call it. We won't get there because we will scoot around and skirt around, is what the text say. We will skirt around it. So we don't even have access to it anymore. And then finally the Lord will say, it's time enough for that. We just need to have the hard conversation so that you can get back to what you're supposed to have. And so we're going to read the text. I got some other sacred texts because the body keeps the score. Where my clinicians at? Whether you a chaplain or clinician, whether you a pastor, whether you a pastor, because I got pastors that use the body keeps the score by Bessel van der Kolk in their pulpit. That's a sacred text. Listen, they say a sacred text, and so because the body will keep the score, and we're gonna read it. So this sounds like it's before we go.
Before we go into that, I want to say this. Let's be clear: there is no such thing as a trauma remind. That is not a real term.
Zay, I looked it up. I tried. I Googled. I went through my book. I even went to the DSM, the most recent one, because I said, well, maybe I missed something because I ain't read that whole book. That's a lot of book. I said, maybe I missed something in my skim through that they done added a new term.
No,
I asked clinicians, and I said, the trauma remind, because this stuff goes out.
Yeah. This is someone who has not been theologically or clinically educated. Truly. Yeah, they have degrees, but when you look at the schools that they went to, the degree is not worth the paper it was printed on.
What I want to say is we do not educationally shame people with live moments. I can't be honest, we don't. Like, we might make a joke, but truthfully, we prefer that people go educate themselves because the Bible tells you to do that in Proverbs. Now you ain't even got to read the Apocrypha, just Proverbs chapter 6 through 9 will tell you to go find some wisdom. I'll go get it. Matter of fact, don't it say in Proverbs it tell you to hug it? Like, go get you some education. That's fine. The education is a beautiful thing for you to have. Jesus taught in the temple. So do y'all think that in the immaculate conception that he immaculately had an immaculate mind? Jesus learned too.
Because
But
he went in, the book says he actually went and sat at the feet of the elders.
said at him. So
Because in order for him to be able to freely speak, the ministry would not have started had he not been trained. Because Jewish tradition, if you were not trained, you could not stand up to speak.
my God. Yeah, we
So
could have
the
talked
mere-
about that today too. Now we in Advent. We ain't trying
so,
Jesus
so
was
the mere
born.
fact that he's able to talk in the temple, the book is giving us a strong implication that he had formalized training in the history and the ways of Hebrew and the priesthood. So Jesus was truly priest and prophet
My God.
and king
My
because
God.
he sat with them. And
He said,
so even when he calls Paul, he said when he calls Saul and makes him Paul, he doesn't say now that you met me, go out and preach. He sends him for years to sit at the feet of Gamaliel.
you got to learn, y'all. Education is beautiful. We knock it in the church. It hurts me. But today, because
In
that's
the
gonna be a
black
whole
church,
other
we knock it in the black because
mm,
white folk been going for a long time, and they pay you for going. See, they honor the fact that you got a D.Min or a PhD. You can't even walk in their pulpit to talk about you gonna try to be their pastor unless you got in the major churches, unless you got D.Mins
you
and
had these people shouting, Zay. These people ready. They finna shout.
D.Mins and PhDs. But in the black church, because we were so and see that's the hystrosity and which is an atrocity of what slavery has done to us, because we were not allowed education, we devalued education. And so because it was our way of holding on, because the only preachers that were allowed to preach were those whose messages were approved by the master and the overseer. And although he couldn't read, the master told him what to say. He had a call, but the master told him what to say. Now, if I juxtapose that with today's time, we still listening to the master, and the master is still telling us what to say, and it ain't Jesus. We're looking at Trumpism going around this country. We're looking at people wanting to bow to governmental associations so they can get money. We're looking at folk trying to connect to other preachers and listening and changing their whole message. Because the person who we started off talking about, if you watch his mama, his sister, and his daddy, there's no way he could say what he said about Sage and then 5 months later, 6 months later, talk about he want to sell weed. Unless you listening to a master, and that master may be dollar. And you cannot, and when I say dollar, I mean the dollar, the bill. And so you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve God and mammon. And so that is the process where we are. I want us to be clear before we get even into the biblical part of it. Let's put it in context historically and look at the hystrosity of it. That I understand why black folk don't like church, don't like education when we're talking about preachers, because that was one of the few places we had power or a level of authority, although we were still listening to the master.
And I feel like that's context too. And I genuinely, I think we can, yeah. Let's just read Deuteronomy chapter 140. I know some of y'all like that ain't got nothing to do with it, but it does, because the way the Bible is written, you got a verse that'll lean on into another piece of how it's broken down. So verse 46, chapter 1.
I hope that made sense. Nobody think it didn't.
Oh, it's about to make sense. After you had stayed at Kadesh as many days as you did, these people they got beat down and had to weep because the Lord said, you know what, I'm not finna keep doing stuff for you. So as you stayed at Kadesh as many days as you did, we journeyed back into the wilderness. They had to go back into the wilderness. They flip your camera back into the
wilderness. What happened?
I don't know, but I'm gonna flip it for you. So
hey, I don't know how that
well, I flip it. Okay, you got it. Back into the wilderness. So they went back to what they had already came out of. I don't
That
know
was
what
just
happened.
cologne. Yeah, I don't know how that happened. I'm glad I'm saved, and that was just cologne.
Well, we're going to talk about it. So back into the wilderness, in the direction of the Red Sea, as the Lord had told me, and skirted around Mount Seir for many days. Mind you, they went backwards. So that's what we're talking about today, because you're just skirting around. You not only are you walking in circles, you're going back to what you don't want to go to, something you done already crossed. So then the Lord said to me, "You have been skirting this hill country long enough. Head north and charge the people as follows. You are about to pass through the territory of your kindred, the descendants of Esau who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, so be very careful. They will be afraid of you, so be very careful not to engage in battle with them, for I will not give you even so much as a foot's length of their land, since I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession." Y'all skirted long enough. Like, what is this thing about this reliving, redoing? Because that's what makes us fight. Like, to go back and not manage the hard conversation. So I think everything that we started out with, Zay, is going to go into this text. You have skirted around this hill. You've avoided your stuff. I know platform I'm on. You've avoided your stuff long enough. I'm about to send you forward into a place where people actually afraid of you. They know more about you than you know about you, because you won't deal with your mess. You won't deal with your heart. You won't deal with what's in front of you. You won't touch it. And so you keep presenting but skirting around. So what does that look like? So I mentioned the body keeps the score. If you don't have this book, I'm not telling you to go out and buy this book. This book is this is a hard read, but it's a good read. But in this book, Buster Vanderkal talks about the responses that our body has. He talks about what it looks like in the same time, like even the wavelength of it. He goes through all of this that our body has. He talks about telling the truth and dealing with it. Be honest with yourself so that you don't have to stop your journey to go back to something you already crossed. You got to read you already crossed the red. You are turning back toward the Red Sea, something you already crossed, because you don't want to deal with what's there in front of you. You want to deal with moving forward. And then moving forward, you also tagging people along with you because you're skirting around that particular hill. African Americans, Black folks, anybody who's watching this, what hill are you skirting around in your Black pain? The article, not it wasn't an article, it was a post. The pastor, the leader, was saying that Black men have given women enough power. Black men have given women enough power long enough. They've had their turn. There is nowhere in the Bible that you're going to find that we're fighting at each other because of our gender. When you can show it to me, y'all put it in the chat if you know it. I put the chat up. We'll talk about it. We'll invite you on the stream where it says we're fighting each other. We're putting ourselves in opposition. We're about to circle a hill and call it a trauma remind if we go for that versus facing Black trauma. Zay said it when he started it. We have so much stuff that's epigenetically wrong. This issue that said we got to put each other at each other.
And so that's why I said he's not educated. That's why I was dealing with the education piece. Because had he been educated, had he understood the value of education, he would understand what he said was inappropriate and was not founded. Ooh. And so that is my issue, is that I've watched a lot of preachers who preached one way, but then went to seminary, went to school, sat with people who were learned, or as the old folk like to say, learn it, and learned something. It changes the way you see the text, and therefore thereby how you present the text.
Yes.
And so when you're talking about trauma, many times because we fail, and you talk about circling this mountain, we keep circling this because we fail to deal with our own ideals about education, our own ideals about the past. We keep recreating the trauma.
And so here is again, the term trauma remind,
which is not a term.
To be trauma informed is what it seems like we keep missing in our community. And all my brilliance, I need y'all to chat it up because I'm gonna put it up. we keep missing or keep scooting around trauma informed. Now, Dr. Jennifer Baldwin, that's my friend. We still ain't been able to go eat lunch through all of this mess. But I love her. Her brilliance lives in Woodstock, Georgia. I couldn't believe it when I found out where she lived. But she talks about the sensitivity of trauma when we look at the Bible. Like, what is that we have to become now trauma sensitive in the theological thinking, because that happened in the book. Like, what you're trying to say that is evil, I just read it to y'all. These people were going back. They started to circle and go back to something they had already overcome. Then the Lord said, you know what? I'm tired of that. We're going to stop circling, and I'm going to send you to a place that's afraid of you. They are afraid of you because they see more on you than you do. But don't you take nothing from them. That's an easy fight. In other words, face your trauma. You can't convince me that the children of Israel were not traumatized. Traumatized to the point that they believed in that enslavement, that it was in their soul, their body, and their DNA. It took generations for them to get out of the wilderness. People say because they got lost, but it took generations for them to get the toxicity.
See, they when Moses brings them out, one of the first things that they say when it looks hard is we could have stayed, or we should have stayed in slavery. We should have stayed with Pharaoh. And so part of the reason why they were in the wilderness wasn't because they got lost. Literally, God tells them that they must stay. God confounded them so that they would have to deal with what was inside of them. Even if you go back and you really look at the entire story, it deals with your own trauma, your own sense of self. Because in our eyes, we were as grasshoppers, so they saw us as grasshoppers. Woo! And then when we move from that, we go into, oh my God, we should have just stayed in the wilderness. We should have just stayed we should just stay with Pharaoh, because now we're in the wilderness and we don't know where we're going. Oh my God, we're at this river, we're at this Red Sea, and we can't cross it. We're gonna die. All of this stuff because they have not dealt with and understood that the same God that brought them through everything else is the same God that's going to carry them through. And they are the same people that God has chosen to go through it. But we're making up terms trying to sound deep, talking about a trauma remind when we should be talking about trauma and how do we deal with it and moving forward. Now, Miss Reverend Jackson, Dr. Jackson, Reverend Brown, I'm with you when you're right. I'm with you when you're right. I've seen it too. But what I've also seen is that when you really allow the process to happen, it changes how you see the text. And if you really are honest, when it changes how you see it, it changes therefore how you present it. Because unless you're just willing to be alive, to stay in the system, which goes back to our point. So we're not at odds, ma'am. It goes back to our point that you're reliving your trauma because you'd rather stay in a broken place than to give it up to move to something different. So I'm with you when you're right. We on the same page, ma'am. We together.
Now this is a book I do recommend. I told you I was bringing my sources today because again, I went and tried to find this term because the particular preacher, I don't know how big they are, but I know they big enough to be seen and people take that. And so Black pain is real. It's real. And chapter 9 of Black Pain, there's an excerpt that speaks about the toxicity of an environment. You read the text different when you sit in spaces and you sit at somebody's feet. I'm not inviting you to go to divinity school. I'm not inviting you to do anything like that, but I am inviting you to get educated. Education looks like sitting at the feet of someone who actually knows what they're talking about and gleaning from them. Do not think that you know everything. So glean from them. So here's some feet work from the author herself in this book. If you are a person in a toxic environment, Dr. Carl Bell believes that education is not enough. That's why we harped on it, then we coming back sit with. So it's not enough to overcome pain and trauma. Healing from pain and preventing trauma means putting into effect particular principles for resiliency. First, community. We haven't taken the time in 3 years to even define resiliency. Like, what does it look like to be resilient? From my understanding, resilience can only be found when you understand your ground, your base, when you hit some Ephesians chapter 3, verses 14 through 21, because we love to talk about verses 20, but go to verse 14 through 16. You need riches of glory for your inner man so that you can get grounded, connected back to Christ. Because we claim Christianity on this platform. But some of y'all, whatever your ground may be, taking care of your inner man. The first thing is rebuild the village. Activities that ensure that there will be villages will ensure that there will be social norms, rules, spoken and unspoken, and values that will guide the direct behavior. What I would add to Dr. Bell is make sure that the inside of you is good before you approach back into the village. Like, what are you doing to take care of yourself? This is where the book that is written by Terry Williams works with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. What are you doing to take care of all of these amygdala responses that you're going to have when it looks like I'm just skirting around the hill? I'm just going back to something I done already crossed over, and I'm not making up terms that's going to bring harm to the community. So one, it's a reset on our social norm. You don't get to create that by yourself. You can take care of yourself, and then you get to bring it back to the community, and the community gets to decide what is this social norm. To providing access to care.
So that's
what change the whole dynamic, because it ain't got nothing to do with being a man or a woman. What is the access to care? Where is the holistic point of mind, body, soul, spirit? Are we in the book, Zay? I'm just making sure, because
I'm with you. That's what I was about to say. That is what the Mayat, which informs the 10 Commandments, that's what they are. It is the community coming together to establish and set social norms and mores. So the Mayat got 99. And if you read the Mayat, you will understand that it came before the 10 Commandments. But definitely, I'm not going to go into that. But then the 10 Commandments come along out of that Mayat, out of what was happening, and it sets those social norms, those social mores that we're not going to kill, that mothers and fathers are to be respected. But likewise, mothers and fathers, don't push your children to wrath. Don't steal. Don't all of these things. So that, all of these things we are told in the 10 Commandments, because they're setting social norms. And so when they say that something is an abomination in Old Testament, and they say that something is sinful, what they're saying is it is separating you from the community. It is separating you from what we have agreed were going to be our norms and mores. Abomination didn't mean that it was evil. If you go back and look up the word, it meant that it was countercultural.
So clearly the people in this text had did something that was countercultural to get kicked out of where they were, sent back as a reminder to look like what they had already come through. And the Lord said, enough is enough. The Lord, God was finally like, what, enough is enough. Y'all keep scooting around. Like, I'm over this. I done promised you something. I'm still going to give you that. But this is how you're going to have to do it. When you have to relive your trauma, it is supposed to advise you in your next steps. So we don't go through these principles as listed, but we did too. It's advising you of your next steps. But you have to build a relationship with the emotions that go along with the trauma so that you can manage them and bring them back into a balanced and clarified state. If you do not, you're going to keep on scooting around that hill. You're going to visit that hill so many times. And in fact, I'm tired. Because you're going to eventually come out. You see the instructions the Lord gave. Don't take nothing from those people because they already afraid of you. You already looking like how you looking. They scared because you ain't dealt with your mess. And sometimes people, your mess, it could have been caused by somebody else. But we are responsible for our emotional response. When we notice that it is not well, we're responsible for that. Else we're going to keep skirting around the hill. So how do we do that? That looks like attunement. Emotional intelligence is going to invite you to be in attunement.
Yes.
So you won't sit yourself in constant atonement and you can heal and move forward. To be in attune is not consistently beating up on yourself in this trauma remind. We have to know what it is so that we don't live in a repeat, and we know how our bodies and our brains are responding to that thing which caused us harm.
Because when you really atone and repent literally means to turn from that which has caused you separation. So that which has caused you separation. And so when we talk about sin, let's be real. Sin is not so much that you did something bad or evil. Sin is whatever separates you from God and yourself and the community.
Mm.
So when we talk about sin, I mean, I implore you, look at Y'all know I'm going to say something about Bonhoeffer. Go look at Bonhoeffer's definition of sin. That when you cause somebody to become something that they are not, when you cause yourself to become something that you are not, when you are forced into a place by self or others, that is sin. That is sin. That is sin. And so when we deal with sin from this, instead of trying to send folk to hell, let's send folk to help. Let's send folk to health. Let's send folk to a place of saying, you know what? Why are you doing this? Why are you still circling this same mountain when you've already been given the promised land? Because something in you can't do. And I just, y'all, it's about, for me, I'm not a clinician at all. That is not my ministry. That is Margaret. But I took enough classes. I stayed in seminary long enough that I know a little bit about something. I don't know much, but I know a little bit about it. And I know many times what God is trying to get us to do is not deal with anybody else, but deal with ourselves. And that
they don't even know what I did earlier today. So I had to do a sermonette today, and it wasn't much to the sermonette because every time I tried to make it big. But in the text, in your wisdom text, in the text, it says that wisdom came so that you could see yourself. So it will be best that you didn't deal with environments when they didn't want to deal with you, because they're going to hurt you and they're going to injure you. That's in the text. Go read Proverbs 8:9. You keep dealing with places that don't want you. Deal with yourself. That is such an invite to care. That's not what we're preaching in our churches. Like, and so here we are missing.
But we selling weed though. I'm sorry.
That invite the weed. I ain't gonna lie, y'all. Y'all know what this is, a L.I.F.T moment. Now, when I heard it, can we laugh a little bit? I said, well, shoot, oh Lord, like I might have to end up being a member.
Don't you say the name of the church. The name of the church.
I didn't say the name of the church.
I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that marijuana is wrong. I'm not saying marijuana is a problem. What I am dealing with is the intent behind it. And what I am dealing with is the reasoning, the intent behind it, and the comments that were made by this person previously. So we're looking at two major preachers. One is major in certain settings, one is major in other settings. But there are two very major, well-known preachers that have said some really off-the-wall stuff. One is extremely educated. So it goes back to Reverend Jackson's point that some folk will go to seminary and it will not change them. He has regressed. That the one who is highly educated. Then you got the other one who ain't educated, who said the Lord gives him everything. All he got to do is pray. And he takes it literally when it says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That tells you something right there. When somebody gets up in the pulpit and says that they can do whatever job that is possible because the Lord gives them strength, that is borderline narcissistic, if not all the way over into narcissistic. That's scary. You got to watch those type of people. You got to watch those, because those are the people who will drop you and blame you. And so you got to, because they did all things through Christ. And so that means that they have no fallacy. That means, and they can't see their own stuff. So you got to be careful with focusing. So we got these two men, these two well-known pastors, and we're just opposing them today as we look at this text, because I want everybody to see context. I want everybody to be clear. And so as we juxtapose them and what they've said publicly, and people who 2 or 3 years ago was screaming, don't Don't legalize marijuana. Don't do this. Are now shouting, yeah, Pastor, we with you. And then the other people are following this other preacher going, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a trauma remind. No, it's not a trauma remind. You are reliving it. You're in it. You remind me something I forgot and you brought it back to me. No, 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 no. You're in it. So let's deal with what you're in. See, the fact is, and I told this to Margaret, and I'm not going to say it how I told it to Margaret in the text message. I'm going to say it like this because I'm trying to be real godly in these next few weeks because God has been showing me some stuff. So I'm trying to be real godly. I'm trying, y'all. It's real hard for me because I'm from Atlanta and I just want to say what I want to say, but God is keep pulling me back. Is that the reason why he said what he said is because he's dealing with his own trauma. And saying I pause for parenthetically so that we can let that marinate. He is dealing with his own trauma. I dare say both of them are dealing with their own trauma. Both preachers. One has lived in the shadow of his daddy, and now he lives in the shadow of the pastor that was before him. And he's trying everything to get out of the shadows, although he's well known. You can be well known and still be in the shadows. I'm just letting you know. You can be popular and still be in the shadows.
Can somebody put that in the chat? Because that's going to be a comeback for 2023. Y'all put that in the chat.
And then the other one is dealing with his own self and his own processes of who he is and not being able to reconcile his own self with what he's been taught to teach. And so that when you look at this, you got two broken men leading from a broken place, leading from shadows and broken. And they're trying to push them away and trying to appear whole. But you know, old folk, I told you I hung out with old folk. They used to tell me when you got too high, they say, baby, your slip showing. It was a slap in the face both ways. It was a slap. They said, baby, your slip showing. You got to go fix yourself because every time you try to hide it, and I'm not saying everybody got to know your business. Oh, God. What I'm saying is you have to be comfortable enough with who you are to be honest with yourself and God about who you are.
So the recommendations from Dr. Bell, Dr. Carl Bell, because we did two.
I'm sorry.
No, because we're finna stay right here. Improve bonding, attachment, and connectedness dynamics. There is an impossible thing to do when you haven't dealt with yourself for you to try to improve bonding and attachment with somebody else. You have to be connected to yourself. You have to know what you're holding. One of the worst things that we came up with in the last 3 years is I'm going to match your energy. Why? You need to know your own. Because I need to know what I need to connect to and what I don't need to connect to. What is toxic and what is not. So that when I am going before the people, when I am speaking, I'm coming from a place that is self-led. For my people who are the sky, I'm coming from a place where I'm sitting in the riches of glory, understanding that the spirit that is in me is producing good fruit. Now, if I'm sitting here matching somebody's energy, I'm in their energy. I'm matching it. You understand? I'm matching it. I'm comparing it, and I'm in competition with it, which means I'm not in anything I just said about being in myself. And so I don't know how to bring a community back into some level of attunement. Guess what it's going to look like? It's going to look like punishment every time. I'm never going to be able to match you completely. I'm not going to be able to do that. The other thing is if I can get in that space, I can then help the community and other people develop their esteem, not grow weed. I'm just going to be clear about that. You growing weed and teaching people entrepreneurial skills, the people that's going to come to you already know they just finna feel all right with doing it. They finna show you how to do something. And then the third one this is the fifth one altogether, helping folks develop social skills. Here we are with this emotional intelligence space, and we have to teach it. What we have done in our communities, we stopped doing everything they just said. We have stopped. Like I'm gonna do me. Oh no, I'm gonna come up with words because that just sounds good. Versus doing the study, doing the research. I'm sorry, I don't see it, but study to show yourself approved so that you don't cause somebody to have gangrene. Read the whole text. You don't make other people sick. Say how stay where you were, because how in the these two people that we're speaking of tonight, not in a bad way, because we pray for the men and women of God on this place. I promise we do. Like, what happens when they are major effects of community, but they don't know how to be in tune with themselves? They don't have a clue.
I don't know why this coming to me. You probably gonna laugh at me. Somebody gonna probably say that don't make no sense. But I'm learning in this point this season to just go with it. Um, David has a son. Not David. Jonathan has a son,
Did
and David and them are fighting.
so
They're in war,
mm-hmm.
and Jonathan has to finally make a decision about who he is and who he's going to support. Is he going to support his father, or is he going to support the person that had become his very best friend, who they say to each other, I love you more than I've ever loved any other woman? And so in this, that creates some trauma, because I got the person who I love, who is my confidant, who I have shared my innermost secrets with, fighting against the person who made me who I am. And I'm stuck in the middle. And I'm being pulled by both sides. And I have to decide who I'm going to follow. And whoever I follow will help to define who I am. And so as I do this, I have to leave others who are looking for me to help them. I have to leave them where they are in the care of people who are not ready to care for them. So Jonathan has a son. His name is Mephibosheth. He's left in the care of a nurse who's afraid of what's going on around her. So she's running, trying to get away. And she drops that baby. It causes damage to the baby because the baby, although formed, is still not completely strong.
My God.
And so what happens in birth follows this baby until he's a man. After the battle is over, after the war is over, because David loved Jonathan, he goes and finds the baby and gives him a share, or the portion that he is supposed to have, but it doesn't stop the fact that he's still lame. He's still broken. Why do I bring that up? It's because these men that we're talking about, these pastors, these leaders, and not just these two are examples. They're exemplars of what's going on in the church. We got people who are being pulled because they have not yet dealt with where they were, who they are, and where they're going. And they're leaving a lot of babies in the hands of folk who can't deal with them, and we're being dropped. And it's leaving the church and the people lame and broken in their feet. Yeah, we still gonna get what God promised us, but we getting it broken when we could have gotten it whole. I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. That again, these pauses, because to digest that, and it's literally lining up, because David way past the skirt. It wouldn't be a David if they hadn't skirted and returned back and went through, right? But
Right.
here we are with an unmanaged trauma. Like, I read the Bible with different eyes. He's absolutely trauma informed with trauma sensitivity. And what the people didn't get is God just finally got tired of them dealing with it. I believe that we serve a God that'll finally get tired of you dealing with your mess, that God will push you forward. Because that's what happened.
Okay.
But what brokenness was inside of that when God said, enough is enough. I'm going to send you with special instructions. Here are the instructions. I'm going to send you to and through a people. You can't have what they got, which means y'all are in scarcity. That instruction wouldn't have came if it wasn't a level of scarcity. Because guess what? These people are afraid of you. You could have got what you could have manipulated them. They scared of you. Do not. use what's going on with them for your
To make
gain, because
yourself
you
feel
got
better.
to heal. And I'm going to let you go through this so you can get to the actual promise. How many of us living in spaces where we know we end up with our pain? God just finally got tired of you scooting, and then you manipulating situations because people really, it's called an abuse of power.
Yeah, the abuse of power. And so I want to take it. I want to use another example. Another favorite scripture of my story. I'm going to say scripture, but story. Prophet comes up against a false prophet. She threatens to kill him. He runs, hides in a cave, thinking he's gotten away from what has caused him trauma. And watch what God does. God doesn't say stay here. God doesn't say go forward and go to this new place and start over. God said, now that you've gotten it out and you've cried and you realize that you have this issue, go back and face it. And God sends the prophet back to Jezebel to face Jezebel that he just ran away from because he was dealing with the hurt and the pain of what she promised him. So he goes back. And when he goes back, his greatest victory is on a mountain with all of her prophets. And he comes out the only one. I'll give you another story. Samson. Samson is the strongest man. Y'all know Samson's the strongest. I love that song. I can't sing it right now. But Samson, you better run, you better run. Samson was a man. His hair was so, y'all know the song I'm singing. I'm Baptist. I'm good at Baptist. And he kills all these folk with the jawbone. I love this word. This was when I could cuss when I was a little boy, because I would just say I'm reading the Bible. He killed all the men with the jawbone of an ass. I preached it one time before, went crazy and said when asses help you. But anyway, he killed it with an ass. He killed it with the jawbone of an ass. It's so much in that it's an ass, but it's the ass's jawbone. I wish I had time to deal with it. But I don't. So he kills him with the jawbone of an ass. He finds this woman because he got family issues, because he was in love and his mom and daddy wouldn't let him marry who he wanted. So after that, he starts sleeping with all these different women. He finds this woman named Delilah, who he knows his mama and daddy wouldn't approve with, but he falls in love with her again, and he begins to tell her his secrets. She shaves his head, and she makes him as strong as a normal man. Y'all know the song. I didn't call it music before. And so he puts his head in her lap. She shaves his head. He becomes as a mortal or a mere man. He has no more strength. They take him. They gouge his eyes out. They beat him. They tie him in between two columns. And all of them stand around on the portico, looking down at him, laughing, making him act up. And all of a sudden, when he says, God, I'm sorry for what I didn't deal with. I'm sorry for who I've become. I'm sorry. And he addresses it. It says in the text, his hair begins to grow back. And he feels the hair grow back. And he feels the hair grow back. And when he feels the hair grow back, the book says that he pushes on the columns and he destroys more at that moment than he did in his entire ministry and career, because he dealt with what he had not dealt with, the trauma, the hurt, the pain. And it says that is what made him known. It wasn't the other stuff. They start telling the rest of the story because he killed more in his death than he ever did in his life, because he dealt with what had him bound. So when you deal with it, and we're about to go because it's almost time to go. We almost 2 hours. When you deal with it, you don't have to push the doors open. The doors swing open. Because that is the sign now that you're ready for the next one. What's the next one? The next level, the next dimension, the next movement, the next push. You're ready now to go into because now you can walk through the people who you could manipulate and not manipulate them, because you know that's not for you. See, we only manipulate and control to get stuff that ain't really for us. Y'all don't believe me? I wish I had time, but think about all the folk who have manipulated you. They took from you something they didn't work for. you only manipulate and hurt people and hurt folk in that particular way to get stuff that ain't meant for you because you don't want to go do the work to get what is yours. So you manipulate others, and because it's easier.
My God. Yeah, when I say Zay is in the book with me, like because two more reestablish the adult protective shield. What the pain that was caused by some others. When you begin to attune, when you begin to reestablish or develop that esteem, when you begin to sit in places of care, then you can now, informed in your trauma, find the right place that's not toxic. That is the adult protective shield. I can now connect with people that are not toxic because I know what toxicity looks like, smells like, tastes like. I can say, you know what? That's not going to be good for me. I'm not talking ill about a human. I don't. You're not good for me. So you reestablish this adult, and guess what that shield will do? It will call you out on your new values. It'll say, hey, that's not good. You don't want to do that. You don't want to go down that way. You don't, because you're gonna end up skirting around again. You don't want to do that. Again, establishing that. The last one is minimizing the effects of trauma. You have to recall because you got to reveal. I'm gonna shout out to Coach Deb. You got to reveal what you want to heal. You cannot. You're gonna have to be reminded of your trauma. The remind ain't the thing that spins you out. It's the relive that spins you out because you get stuck in the trauma vortex. And your body, that's a your body starts going everywhere. So you want to start doing, thank you, Reverend. You want to start doing harm reduction for yourself. What? Minimize the effects of the trauma, which means I got to know what my trauma is. I might have to go revisit the Red Sea and skirt around the mountain because I wasn't getting it. And eventually, I don't want to be in the space where the Lord says it's enough. You want to know why? Because did I resolve it? Or was it just enough for me to get through with instructions on not to hurt somebody else?
We just said the same thing, Margaret. We just said the same thing.
Yeah. Ooh.
And so, I'm just keeping it in the Bible because, again, I tell you, I'm not a therapist, so I can't quote the therapist stuff. I can quote history. I can quote politics. I'm gonna stay in Bible because that's my job tonight. Is Bible. I quote it all the time. It's one of my favorites. In the book, it says, "And they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony." If you don't deal with it and talk about what has caused you harm, there is no testimony. The testimony is how, because when you start to deal with it, you open yourself up for healing because as you share, others will share, and you now are learning from each other, and the community is now growing and pulling each other together and pulling, and so it's reducing the harm because we're now seeing how much we are alike, and we now can share the burden of what we have dealt with. See, the enemy only has victory when we hold it in. Because we think we're suffering. We think we're the only one dealing with it, and we suffer in silence. So when we suffer in silence, we take an Uber to a hotel that's a mile away from our house, and we sit in a bathtub and shoot ourselves and miss our checkout time so that our children and our wife don't find us in the house.
Boom. My God.
Because nobody allowed us to talk about it. And nobody taught us that we can talk about it and still be men. See, now I'm coming back full circle. So because when that man, yes. when that pastor got up on Facebook and said that he gonna help you build men, I want to say what I really said to Margaret. And I'm sitting there going, how do you build a man? How do you build a man? It ain't a Build-A-Bear. We're not Teletubbies. You can't build a man. You can't make a man. A man becomes. He's born a male. He becomes a man. And so when we talk about this, we have not dealt with this. And so we have all of this trauma, which is causing us at higher rates to kill ourselves, to have cancer, to have high blood pressure, to have heart attacks, and to have strokes because we cannot share with the community. We cannot share with the community. And so we overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Because when we share it, the community becomes enlarged and enlightened. And we're able to share the burden of what we're dealing with. So when I was a younger, and I'm saying this, and I'm not being petty. I promise you. I hope y'all can hear my intent. When I was younger, if a person could do certain things as a preacher, I listened to them. I liked them because they were good. They were good. But as I've gotten older, I realized that I can't drink from every faucet. Just because it gives water don't mean it's good for me. And so y'all be careful with some of these preachers. And folks say that about me and Margaret. And I when I was younger, I would try to cuss them out and fight with them. But now Margaret and Margaret laugh because the older I get, she's like, you really becoming so different. Don't try me on certain things because I'm still Atlanta. But as I'm getting older, it's just certain stuff. I'm just like, you know what? I don't have to fight it. I don't have to answer it. I don't have to address it. I don't have to speak on it. And so I started to say is that know which faucets you're drinking from. And know if it's nourishing you. If it's nourishing you, you drink from it. It's for you. But if it's dirty, muddy, and unclear,
Toxic.
Margaret took my thunder. Yeah, it's toxic. It ain't good for you. Because it will keep you from being dehydrated, but it'll create other issues on the inside. Dirty water will keep you from being dehydrated, but then you start getting other issues going on in your stomach, in your body, because the water is toxic. So be careful where y'all drinking from, because for this man to get up there and start talking about, because I knew immediately what it was. I saw the poster before Margaret sent it to me. But I wasn't going to address it because who he was. I was just like, I'm sorry. So I wasn't going to address it. I wasn't going to even give it any credence. But then as Margaret and me talked through text, I realized that is a place that creates more trauma and more pain. Yes. Because men are thinking that they have to live up to a certain thing to become or to be considered a man. And the man who said it ain't the most, never mind. So it bothered me.
Let's just put like the man who said it, the definition that he gave in the caption, he don't be the definition of what he gave as like at all. And so appearance, the aesthetics of it didn't look well. I don't know what he is, but the aesthetics of what he said.
I wasn't even going into sexuality. I was just going into the
it can be. I said
aesthetics. Nobody coming for me because I'm trying to live my life
because but he said, he was becoming too. But at the end of the day, there are spaces that we need to manage. The other book I used tonight, Emotional Intelligence. I said it along with the Bible. So one community know that there's a sacred text that we call Bible. I don't negate that. But what is sacred for you that's going to start? I said for Dr. Bell, I made it 8. He gave 7. I said 8. What are you doing to take care of yourself before you re-enter into the community? What are you doing? Like how are you taking the riches of glory to inform the inner man for healing? What are you doing? Then coming back to the community. And in that communal state, offering yourself in a space where healing can happen so that you're not misunderstood in your healing. Healing can happen. So rebuilding the village. Rebuilding the village includes knowing who needs to be in your village, providing access to care, Dr. Bell speaks from healthcare. It's a medical model. I'm telling you from this access to care. How are you taking care of your body? How are you taking care of your mind? How are you taking care of the environment of people you're with? And how are you taking care of the totality of who you are? The Bible is going to tell you mind, body, soul, spirit. Improving bonding, attachment, and connectedness dynamics. How you can, is it toxic or not? If you need permission to be able to do that, please go read Proverbs 8 and 9 in your Bible that gives you permission. Wisdom was here before we all got here, and wisdom tells you how I'm going to guide you, and then tells you don't go hang out with toxicity because it's designed to hurt you and harm you. Don't do that. How you connecting? Helping folks develop esteem. When you got you together, guess what you can do? And you ain't even got to work that hard because you just go show up to the room and people going to want to get together. 5, helping folks, or 6 in this case, helping folks develop their social skills. How can we now form community? For some of y'all know this sounds like grouping, right? So it sounds like a storming phase, sounds like the phases of the 4 phases of forming a group. Then reestablishing the adult protective shield. Some people, that one is big. Who can be in my corner? Because trauma will convince you nobody can. And I got to do this alone. No, who can be there? Again, knowing toxicity. Then minimizing the effects of trauma. People, do not encapsulate yourself in your trauma by not telling anybody. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. When you do not speak to your trauma, guess what? You start skirting around. You skirt around, like, because you get sent back so that you can see it. Because eventually you got to talk about it. And a lot of people are like, well, Jesus didn't. Jesus talked about that trauma so much. How many times did he tell everybody he was gonna die and get up? I don't know. He did some pre-talk. Like, he kept giving parables about I'm gonna die and I'm gonna get up.
Not only that, he talked about their trauma. I mean, he even the woman with the issue of blood and her trauma. The woman at the well, he dealt with her and her trauma. He made her confront the fact that she was dealing with all these different men. He made the woman who reached out with the issue of blood, he made her confront and deal with the fact that she needed something, and because she tried to get it and leave. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. He dealt with the fact of the 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, how we have to meet people where they are. He dealt with how we gonna preach to folk and not feed folk. You know, he dealt with all of this. So yes, he dealt with trauma. He dealt with where they were and how to meet them and reducing the harm and all of that good stuff. So when people say it to me, that's when I go, oh, okay, yeah, okay, you okay. And Margaret know when I start stuttering, she starts doing that right there because she's like, he tried not to go off, he tried not to cuss, he tried not to, I don't know what to say to you, brother.
Well, I love y'all. My family's waiting on me. They ordering wings and doing stuff. My other sister cousin, I talk about one all the time, but my other sister cousin has flown in from the West Coast, trying to escape the weather that she was living in just to find. I feel like she brought that coldness with her. I was like, you could have kept that over there. So I feel like she brought.
I'm coming to Cartersville tonight, Maria.
So I'm gonna go hang out with them.
Are they in Cartersville?
Yeah, everybody in Cartersville.
They at your grandmama's house? Your mama's house?
They're at my house.
Oh,
we tell all my business on social media. But that's what everybody.
I'm looking for the keys. I'm coming to see Maria.
I love everybody. Zay loves everybody. You see how Zay moving. So my family is amazing. And some of the stuff that I know I bring to this platform comes from
my mom about to text me and tell me if I come to Cartersville and don't come out
because it's too close to their house. So it comes from a woman who, when I say she didn't turn nobody away, and you better not find a way to pick at somebody in their humanity. My grandmother was like, "You're not." And so some of the books I read, I'm just like, I'm reading like my grandmother wrote them. And so that, but we offer that because I will say my grandmother had the mind and heart of Christ. Was she the most saved person? No. When it came down to loving people in their humanity, I've still not seen anybody do it better than her. It makes she rest. May she rest. May Martindale rest.
May Willie leave Fountain Arms.
Look at this. Look at the comparison. My grandmama better than everybody. But this
Not
is
my big mama. Not my big mama.
but we
Cause she,
hope through the holiday season. I don't want to tell you to have a happy new year. I don't know if that's gonna happen for you, and I don't want to insult you. On the other hand, I do hope that you have a lighter year. And then that takes effort. It takes you to speak and be vulnerable in spaces that are not toxic. So wherever space feels safe for you, you get to determine your safety. May God show you where that space may be. May you not have to go skirt around mountains and revisit red seas you've already crossed. And may those things that are intentional to bring harm to you, may you see them and not engage them. Because Peter, First Peter says the dart is already lit and sent at you, but it ain't gonna harm you. And so you got to recognize that and see it. So may Psalms 91 be the thing you sit with if something is heavy for you, because the shadow of God's wing is real. We love y'all. We will see y'all. We coming back because we healthy again. So we will see you all soon. And if it's anything y'all need, let us know. Be blessed. Love you all. And again, stay lifted and